This is the most expensive mic I've ever recorded, but we're gonna find out how this vintage $25,000 U47 compares to a $250 Rode NT1. The most important thing about a mic shootout is that you compare using the same performances. So we've aligned the two capsules as closely as possible and set up the exact same signal chain for both mics. A Neve 1073 preamp into a distressor to control the dynamics a bit, and it took some time to make sure the gain and compression was as close as I could get it since the signal coming from each mic was slightly different.
How you wanna play this. Oh, and you take it all back, tired of wondering where the hell you've been with all this time you have.
The very first time I went into a pro studio, I heard a U87 being used on vocals, and I was totally blown away by the clarity and fullness and detail of the mic. I was convinced that it would change everything for me, so I bought one for my small project studio, and I hated it. I ended up getting an SM7B that beat the U87 every single time. Now, I was in a small, poorly treated room at the time, and those expensive condenser mics, they just pick up more of the nasty room ambience. I found I could get a lot more mileage out of a dynamic mic, and that preference has kind of stuck to this day. I'm just not a mic nerd. I have no emotional attachment or excitement towards these expensive condenser mics. And so I actually came into this test expecting to be underwhelmed. But I want to find out, why do certain pieces of gear become so iconic? Is it purely just a status symbol? Or is there really something about the sound that makes it worth 100 times more?
These awful Sunday mornings, sick from the inertia. Another night you left me spinning round, calming down, pacing my apartment. But you either feel it or you don't, sinking in, there's no in between, and you give it all and you take it all back, tired of wondering where the hell you've been with all this time you have, guessing now you're spending it. I know what you're doing now.
How did you feel singing into a $25,000 mic?
Like $20,000 better. I think that about sounds safe to me.
Another night you left me spinning round, calming down, pacing my apartment. And I left you with some revelations, weeping on the floor now.
Oh my God. I mean, I don't have great ears, but maybe the second one is the expensive one?
So what's the deal with the U47 anyways? Why is it so expensive? Well, here's a little history for you. It was the second mic developed by George Neumann, released in 1947. And by the way, Telefunken U47, Neumann U47, same deal. Telefunken was just the original distributor. And this was the first mic of its kind to have a switchable pattern, either cardioid or omni, and the capsule is made of gold so it won't rust or oxidate. But according to the Abbey Road Institute website, the thing that makes this mic special is the VF14 tube. It's made of metal, not glass, because this tube was also used in a German rocket missile in World War II. But they stopped making these tubes 60 years ago, so they're increasingly rare, and one of them will set you back over $3,000 alone. The U47 quickly became popular and was used on tons of famous recordings throughout the 50s and 60s, like Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Ray Charles, and of course, the Beatles. So considering the rare tube, all the famous singers, and the fact that only 6,500 units were ever made, I can see why the price got jacked up. But still, the ultimate question is, what does it sound like?
You either feel it or you don't, sinking in, there's no in between it. You give it all and you take it all back, tired of wondering where the hell you've been with all this time you have, guessing now you're spending it. I know what you're doing now.
See what happens if I try to boost the top end of that to try and kind of get closer to the Rode. Probably can't even tell when I'm switching back.
No,
Another year rung in with apathy, lone to
swapping them like every 2 seconds right now.
I can hear zero difference yet.
That's just like a little bit of a boost on the top end of the 47.
That's crazy.
So $20 plug-in, you cover the 4 zeros, right?
Yeah.
But you either feel it or you don't, sinking in. There's no in between, and you give it all and you take it all back. Tired of wondering where the hell you've been with all this time you have, guessing now you're spending it. I know what you're doing now.
Like hearing, I'm like, I don't know, they sound the same to me. I'm like, oh, that note's flat. I screwed that up. I'm not listening to the microphone, which I think if you're not listening to the mic, isn't that a win?
That's the point.
For the cheap mic? Like,
yeah. Okay, so I would choose the U47 here. It just has a slightly richer or fuller tone, but honestly, I question my own judgment a little bit. I mean, do I just want it to be better because it's cool? Am I coming into this with preconceived notions because I know it's the mic of choice for huge artists like Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, and Adele? At the end of the day, I think as humans, we can't help but be attracted to these kinds of status symbols. You know, objects that are rare, expensive, and often seen with famous people. Every niche, from cars to purses to guitars and books, they all have these kinds of status symbols, and we audio engineers are no different. We don't want to be left out of feeling cool about our gear. And yes, quality plays a role. It's a very good mic, and good mics cost more money. And there's also only a limited number of these mics in the world, and they'll never be made again. But at a certain point, you gotta admit it's the prestige, it's the status, and not the sound that brings this mic up into the multi-5 figures. And look, if you've got a chance to use one of these expensive, iconic mics, by all means, go for it. It's fun, it's gonna sound great, but I'm pretty impressed by how close the NT1 sounded at 1% of the cost. So don't get too caught up in the hype and become one of those mic snobs who debates which vintage mic sounds best on hi-hats or floor tom. We're living in an amazing time for music where you can make great records and have great success using gear that almost anyone can afford. So let me know in the comments below whether you heard a difference that you think is worth 100 times the price. And if you want some advice on how to achieve a modern pro vocal sound that doesn't require 25K, check out this video here. And if you want to see another recording adventure like this one, click here.